Welcome to Talking iPad, Episode 3. First up, I want to mention WWDC. The keynote will be held on June 22nd, 10 a.m. It's the Monday. Not really a surprise, that's usually when it always is, but a few people, including myself, on the last episode Talking iPad I was talking about, maybe they might do something different. They might, since it's all online this year, but it looks like they'll be sticking to a keynote, which I'm excited about. I enjoy the keynotes. Speaking of the keynote, I want to spend some time today talking about what I would like to see in iPadOS 14. So first up, one of the things I want to talk about is better audio support. This is something a lot of podcasters have been talking about for a long time, including myself. When we say better audio support, we mean multi-stream audio, the ability to have multiple streams of audio at once. So right now, if you're listening to music, you go into YouTube and you hit play on a YouTube video, it pauses that music and plays the audio for that YouTube video. That's great in that instance. That's perfect. I love that for that because on the Mac, it would just play both of those over each other. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't separate the two. Where this falls short is when it comes to something like podcast production. So a way a podcast works is I usually have a phone call with whoever else I'm on the podcast with, Skype call, audio call, whatever. This is how we talk to each other. All of us record our own local audio tracks. Well, right now, there's no way to do that whole thing on an iPad. Most people use a Mac or a PC for that kind of thing. I use a Zoom audio recorder to record my local audio track, and then that gets piped into my iPad so I can have a Skype call. It's a little bit of a hacky setup, and it's not a very affordable setup. It's not a cheap setup at all for doing a podcast. If it wasn't something I used for video productions, I wouldn't do it this way, but I use it for video stuff too, so it kind of works itself out. But I would like to see the multi-stream audio come to the iPad. That way I don't need that Zoom audio recorder anymore. I could record the local track on my iPad, have the Skype call on my iPad, do everything right on my iPad, just like, for those that use a Mac. Next up is improved Files app. So the Files app has been around since iOS 11, and all this time it's felt like a beta. It's really rough. It's very slow. It does this thing with cloud services where it doesn't keep files locally on the iPad. There was supposed to be a feature in iOS 13, never shipped, with the ability to pen files in the Files app so they always stayed local on your iPad. It never ended up shipping, no idea why, but one of the things I would like to see is the ability, we'll pick on Dropbox right here because I use Dropbox, is to have Dropbox and say, hey, I want these folders right here to always stay on my iPad. Don't ever remove the contents of them and do the smart thing where when you select the file, it re-downloads. Because for small things like text files and stuff like that, that's fine. But when it comes to bigger stuff like raw photos, video files, stuff like that, that stuff takes a while to download. So every time I need it, it has to re-download it. It's terrible. I hate that. So I'm hoping that gets improved. And honestly, I just want the bugs to get worked out. It's been around long enough that it shouldn't be as buggy as it is. It should feel a lot faster and it should feel a lot cleaner. The next one is something I have been asking for ever since the iPad Pro was introduced, and that is Pro apps on the iPad. Apple's Pro apps specifically. So Final Cut, Logic, and Xcode, and probably followed by Motion and Compressor. Those 5 are Apple's key Pro apps, and if they wanted to bring back Aperture, literally nobody would complain. It would be amazing if they brought back Aperture. But this is a Pro device. They call it the iPad Pro. There needs to be Pro software to go along with it, and that means Final Cut, Xcode, Logic. I don't expect to see all 3 of those introduced at the same time, but I am expecting at least one of those to be introduced here soon. It has to be it's past time that Apple brings its Pro software to the iPad Pro. And Apple, if you wanted to do Final Cut first, that would be cool. I'm cool with you bringing Final Cut first. Totally not biased. I'm totally not a video YouTube creator, so not biased at all. Just, let's just do Final Cut first. Next up is better backup support. So right now, backing up on the iPad, I don't like it. I don't feel there is a good backup solution for an iPad user right now. There is iCloud. You back up the device to iCloud, but say you have a file locally on your iPad and you delete that file locally. There's no way to recover that. There is no file and folder backup. So this is where I have 2 different ideas for this. One, there could be an API that services like Backblaze and CrashPlan and stuff could build their own apps and hook into and basically do file and folder backups for the iPad. My other thought, and this one's probably a little more reasonable, is bring Time Machine to the iPad, but do it in an interesting way. So there's already external drive support and there's SMB server support. So you could do either one of those. And then on top of that, like, don't just do file and folder backups of the Files app. Do like, so we'll pick the Drafts app. The Drafts app, when you create a new draft in Drafts, it doesn't save a file to the Files app. It's all self-contained and does its own syncing via iCloud, which is fine. It works for the app. But basically back up the Drafts app through Time Machine. So if I were to delete a draft, I could go into Time Machine, open the Drafts app, find that draft, and restore that draft. That would be pretty cool. I would love something like that just took care of the whole system, backed up apps like LumaFusion, Lightroom, the Affinity Photo app, stuff like that, because that would be... So one that I think that it's kind of the big ticket item that I see a lot of people asking for this year is external monitor support. Right now you can plug a monitor into your iPad and it mirrors the iPad, but it has black bars on the side. I talked about this in the last episode of Talking iPad. What I would like to see is them take advantage of popular aspect ratios like 16:9 or whatever those LG ultra wide monitors are, and fill up the contents of that display. I think developers would have to get involved and make their apps work with external displays. So I had this thought a while ago on a podcast that, hey, what if the reason why all the new iPad Pros have 6 gigs of RAM across the board is so that they can have 3 apps, maybe even 4, in split view on an external monitor? Right now I can see why the iPad doesn't have support for 3 apps in split view. Is just real estate wise, especially like on the 11-inch iPad Pro, there isn't just a lot of space there. But on an external monitor, at a 16:9 external monitor, you have a lot more space. You could put more apps up. So maybe they could do something like that to actually make using an external monitor more than just like, hey, here's a bigger screen. Like, there's actually a huge advantage of using an external monitor with an iPad then. So me and Jeff were talking one day on a slab of glass after Apple bought Workflow and like what it could be. And it ended up being, you know, shortcuts now is what it is. But one of my thoughts was, hey, what if Apple gave me the ability to create system-wide keyboard shortcuts for a now shortcut than Workflow? So like I could assign the keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-T to like my new task shortcut. So every time I hit that, no matter where I was in the system, it would run that shortcut and just bring up a pop-up box. I could fill in the pop-up box and then it would go away. It wouldn't open the Shortcuts app. It would just add the task in the background. The only thing I would see is the ask for input action. That would be pretty cool. And then like shortcuts that don't need any input, like they could just run in the background and things like that. I think I like that. I really like that idea. We kind of have that right now with full keyboard access, but it does some stuff with navigation that it kind of gets in the way of the way I use my iPad. There's also, it does do the notification thing, so you still have to hit like pull down on the notification and hit run or tap on the notification. So that it's not full background automation. I just want that extra step. And speaking of full background automation, that's one of the things we got in iOS 13 was background automation via shortcuts. The problem with it is it's not true background automation. A lot of the triggers require you to manually interact with them, like when you arrive at a place, when time. I think some of the only ones that don't require you to do anything are the alarm, turning off the alarm, running NFC tags, and there might be a couple others I just can't remember off the top of my head. But most of them do require you to manually interact. So it's not true background automation. I'd love some sort of mode where when I create those, it gives me the option to turn off that notification. Maybe I have to enter my passcode every time for each one. And that way I'm saying like, hey, yes, I'm okay with these running in the background. I get why by default they don't do that. It could get really bad really quickly for a lot of users if they make something that, hey, send a text message, and they pick the wrong trigger and it sends that text message every single minute. Like, I could see that getting really bad. But, you know, for a lot of pro users like myself, and I'm sure a lot of you that are watching that really know shortcuts, that's something we could really benefit from. Along the same lines as shortcuts, I would like to see better Files app actions. Right now the Files app actions are pretty bad. Basically all your stuff, if you're gonna have something happen automatically without you browsing, it has to be in the shortcuts folder, and I'd like to see that go away. Like, let me pick any folder so it can automatically pull contents from any folder in the Files app. Don't make me manually have to go through. There's some stuff you can do with like Scriptable and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but I'm hoping that we just see better Files app integration with shortcuts. There's so many things that they could do there. Open folders, open files, things like that, because that would be really handy. I'd also like to see more music actions. I really like the music integration in shortcuts. It's really good, but I think it could be even better. Like, keep pushing it, keep pushing all the built-in actions, because honestly, I don't think they should ever stop. Shortcuts is one of those things that not everyone's going to get into it. It's not as popular as something like iMessage. Like, I totally realize that. But for power users that use it, yeah, keep pushing it, keep moving it forward. Let's keep going forward and doing more with it. So more music actions. And honestly, speaking of music, let's make a better music app, because the music app on the iPad isn't great. I'm not a UI or UX designer, but I think it could be better. I think one of the things that would be nice is if, like, when you open it up, the default mode is like, hey, this is your library. This is the stuff that you've added to your library. And then, like, maybe you can hit some buttons that will load the Apple Music stuff. Having it all mushed together, it kind of feels messy, and it feels slow and clunky. So I'd like to see that get better. Big home screen redesigns are rumored as well. One of the things I would like to see is more contents in folders on the home screen. So folders have been around since what, like iOS 4? And it's been the same 9 icons on the iPhone the whole time, but iPhones have been getting bigger and bigger. So let me put more stuff in those folders. Let me, you know, fill up the screen, essentially. You have an iPhone 11 Pro Max. That thing is huge. You should be able to fill up that whole screen in its folder contents with apps or shortcuts even. Also, I want to see a more fluid home screen. So right now, the home screen, especially on the iPhone, is pretty static. You do icons left to right and all the way down. It's kind of boring. The iPad has the ability to pin the widgets column on the side now. But I'd like to be able to put widgets wherever I want. On the iPad, let me put widgets on the whole home screen, build a dashboard, and then in the dock, that's where I put my apps. That's what I would like. But it gives you the flexibility to do whatever you want. On the iPhone, kind of the same thing. Let me put the widgets on the home screen part, and let me put the apps in the dock. But that's a spoiler for an upcoming video. You guys have been asking to see my iPhone home screen for a while, and I've been playing around with some stuff, so I will save that for then. That's kind of it for the stuff I want to see on iPadOS 14. Let's do some Q&A. Like always, you can send in questions using the hashtag TalkingIPad. If you don't want it to go out into the world, you can send it to my Twitter handle. I will put the information in the description as well. If I haven't read your question yet, I will be getting to it, I promise. I got a whole bunch of questions right at first, but now I'm starting to get through the list. So send in those questions, people, because I want to keep doing this. This is just like a permanent Q&A, I guess. So send in those questions. I ask that you send them in via Twitter because I have a spreadsheet that automatically adds that stuff up, and it makes it really easy for me to go through, and that way I don't accidentally lose something. But if you have to email it to me because you don't have a Twitter account or something, my contact info is in the description. So the first question is, when you sit down to read a book or long-form content, do you use your iPad in portrait or landscape? Do you find using the 12.9-inch iPad in portrait orientation odd or uncomfortable? So for a book, honestly, I've just been reading like paperback books. I tried reading in Apple Books for a long time, and I just was always getting distracted because I have Twitter, podcasts, all the stuff on my iPad. It just wasn't working out for me. So I read physical paper books. As far as long form content though, I typically just leave it in whatever keyboard case I have it and read it like I would if it was on a laptop or something like that, just because I don't take it out that often. I mean, sometimes I will take it out and hold it in portrait orientation. I don't find portrait mode too uncomfortable, but that's probably because I was using the 12.9-inch iPad with the home button, you know, for the first and second generation, and that thing was huge, especially compared to the current one. So, and it was a lot heavier as well. So I got used to that then, so now I don't find it too uncomfortable or weird, but I could see how some people might. Like, I think if you're somebody that's going to be jumping between tabs tablet mode and laptop mode and stuff like that, that's where the 11-inch iPad Pro really shines. Next question is, could you discuss when it's best not to install an app and use the desktop site via Safari instead? Google Docs is an example for me, but I'd love to hear about some other apps. Yeah, Google apps are great apps not to use the actual version for because they typically don't have feature parity between the web app. The web app is typically a little bit further ahead, and in some cases has features that will never go to the actual apps on the iPad. So Google Apps are one. Airtable's another that I think is really good in Safari as opposed to its actual app. I don't think Zapier has an app, but I use the Zapier web app. Honestly, I try and stay away from like web apps and productivity applications that require you to use a web site. Stuff like Roam Research, I know, is like the new big one a lot of people are excited for. Notion is one of those apps that's better in the web than it is on the iPad. It doesn't have a great iPad app. I typically stay away from those because I'm so far into the iPad. I like having the native apps. So like one of the big things for me is hitting Command Space, bringing up search, and typing in the name of a draft for me. So I'll type in the name of a draft and I can just tap on it. If I was using something like Roam Research or whatever, I'd have to go to that website and then search for it within the web app. And that's just more steps, and it doesn't feel as native. It doesn't feel as fast and fluid to me. I am gonna do a video talking about web apps versus native apps versus like good solid apps, and then I'm gonna do like paid versus subscription versus free. I'm gonna talk probably in an upcoming Talking iPad episode. I will talk more about that. Next question, is there any way you could design a shortcut for controlling the Magic Keyboard backlight brightness via the widgets on the iPad Pro? No. You can't control the backlighting brightness via the widget of shortcuts. What you can do is there is a URL basically to every setting in settings. So you could get that URL to where the keyboard brightness section is in settings, and then have a shortcut there that you could run and would just open that part in settings. But there's no way to control the actual backlighting via shortcuts. Federico Vitici was the one that figured that out. If I can find where he posted that, I will put that in the description. There's some rumors going around that Apple's working on some sort of keyboard shortcut for the Magic Keyboard and backlighting, but we'll see. So that's it. That's it for this Q&A. Remember, send in your questions, #TalkingIPadQA. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up. If you like what I do here, subscribe, please. It really does help out the channel, and have a great day.